Tune in to Cliff Hughes Online from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. as we broadcast live from the Cyber Smart Conference 2025 at the AC Marriott Hotel, Tuesday, February 11. The inaugural Cyber Smart Conference under the theme Stay Safe in Cyberspace will address the growing threats of cybercrime and cybersecurity challenges. Learn how to fend off hackers at the Cyber Smart Conference 2025. So tune in to Cliff Hughes Online from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Tuesday, February 11. It's the Cyber Smart Conference 2025 at the AC Marriott Hotel. All this and more only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. This broadcast is brought to you by the Ministry of National Security.
The people's champion. Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans for justice. The people's champion, champion, champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand.
Happy Monday. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Justice. My name is Michael Jackson, Executive Director of JFJ.
And I'm Jade Williams, Policy Research and Advocacy Manager at JFJ.
All right, so let us say thank you to our listeners for their continued support, those who are joining us on the Nationwide YouTube platform and those who are also on the JFJ's YouTube platform and those who are listening on Radioland, wherever you are. Thank you so much for your continued audience. We certainly welcome the support. Now, we're going to be discussing a particular topic of interest that you see in the news cycle. And the title that the team came up with this week is Constitutional Crossroads, exploring the three options for a final appellate court. So we're going to be having the discussions about establishing a local court here in Jamaica, the feasibility of that, the Caribbean Court of Justice, and our least favorite, some of us, is staying with the Privy Council, but that's the discussion for today. And we're going to be sharing with you some clips that were made by the Most Honorable Dr. Andrew Holness, our Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, Mark Golding, Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, Marlene Malahoo Fort, and we're going to be playing you a very short snippet from an interview that JFJ did with former Prime Minister Bruce Golding. So we're going to be going through that and explaining to our listeners the developments with moving towards the Caribbean Court of Justice and seeing how best we can just add to some of the discussion so we understand where we're coming from and we can get your feedback on where we need to go. Yeah, so that's for today?
Yes.
All right, so the week that was, and Jade, I'm going to ask you to just chime in as you deem appropriate here. So we have seen in several instances videos that have made it on social media wherein you have citizens issuing what you would call forced apologies by members of the Jamaica Constabulary Force, or videos that suggest that people are to be shamed for whatever infraction they may have committed. And let me start by saying that there is no law that prohibit or prevent a citizen of Jamaica from recording their interaction with law enforcement. You are free to take out your cell phone and video whatever interaction you have with members of the security force. As long as you're doing it and you're not interfering with their lawful duties, no law prevents you from doing that. So in other words, no police officer can say to you, delete that image, delete that recording, because no law prevents it. And based on no law preventing it, we encourage you to record as a matter of accountability for yourself and the officer. Now, where you have that right as a citizen for accountability purposes, police officers do not similarly have that right unless it is a body-worn camera that is being worn and activated, or during the course of an investigation, they would have gotten the necessary permission to record a citizen. Why are we drawing that distinction? There were 2 recordings last week, wherein one of them included some high school students. And we acknowledge that police officers do have the duty and the right to issue caution to our youngsters or any citizen who may have committed some minor offense, and you believe that issuing a word of caution is best served in that situation. However, to now move from presumably issuing a word of caution to recording youngsters, one have to ask the question, why? What is being served by having a video recording of high school students? And the only thing I can come up with is that this is being used as a tool to shame. There's another recording of an individual who is an infamous TikToker. And the allegations are that there was a recording of her without her clothes on. And you ask yourself the question, why did that recording happen in the first place? And how did it make it on social media? The police ought not to be involved in illegal recording of any citizen of Jamaica. You have several constitutional rights that must be considered. You have the right not to self-incriminate, so no police officer should be forcing you to issue any word of apology. You have a constitutional right to privacy, and that must be respected. And anything else to the contrary is a breach of the Constitution and a breach of the protocols that govern our police officers. Now, we have taken note that the Jamaica Constabulary Force is investigating the matter involving Miss Hamilton. It is outrageous, and I think we must all condemn such action. But I take it a step further. We must demand an update of the outcome of that investigation. Because while we welcome the announcement of the investigation, we must also hold the JCF to the fire to say that the public ought to be made aware of the outcome and the disciplinary actions that may be taken against any officer who was involved in that particular incident. And while they are investigating the situation involving Miss Hamilton, they must equally investigate the one involving the high school students, because no officer should be recording our children to embarrass them. That cannot be done. Or her last name is Rosalie Dixon, not Hamilton. Thank you so much. June Dixon. June Dixon.
Yes, thank you for that, Mikhail. I completely agree. I do think that there is some greater consideration that has to be given to not only, people's privacy, but also to their reputations, because these videos are showing them interacting with police officers. Persons would not even have the context for the entirety of this interaction. And in one of these videos, you're talking about minors and what that implication could mean for their reputation going forward. I'm sad.
And it's sad, Jade. I think far too many of us are apologists for bad situations, because these minors apparently they needed to be disciplined. You can discipline without shame.
Yeah.
We look to our police officers with respect. We look to them for leadership. That is what we want to command from our officers. But the moment you divert from that, how different are you? What respect can you expect the youngsters to pay to you when you participate in ill-advised actions such as these? So we call on the JCF not only to commence that investigation, as they indicated they have begun for Miss Dixon, but also for the youngsters. And I hope strong disciplinary actions will be imposed for any officer who have been found to divert from the JCF policy. Very good policies, but we must hold the officers to account.
Thank you for that, Michael. Anything else in the week that was?
Yeah, there. On a sadder note, the 14-year-old who was raped and later died from that tragedy. And, we extend our condolences to the family for it. Price Johnson is her name. But, when you look on the circumstances of that death, the entire incident, you are forced to ask yourself, what kind of society are we living in? That we take the route of recording an incident rather than extending help. We must question ourselves as citizens. So when we are decrying that the crime rate is high, what role do we play in arresting these situations? What role do we play in preventing these incidents from happening? Why am I asking that question? When you look at the incidents of rape in Jamaica generally, it normally is someone in the family or the community that committed the heinous act.
Yes.
But far too many are silent. And you also ask yourself the question, based on the allegations that the perpetrator is someone who has a mental illness, from what I understand, what preventative measure could have taken place to begin with? There was another incident in Mandeville wherein apparently the child was physically assaulted, I believe, by someone who is of unsound mind. And you ask yourself the question, where are the authorities? Where's the family? So that these individuals can get the necessary help. Where if they are at risk to themselves and others, what can we do to help them and to keep other individuals safe? Those were some of the thoughts that came to my mind as I read on, again, the tragic incident with young Price, and our hearts can only go to the mother and the family, and I think we have to do better as a society, because I can't imagine, not only did we record the incident, but to post it online. And to those who continue to post these things, let me remind you, it's against the law. There's a child involved. You have the Child Pornography Act, that's the name of that legislation, Jade. And once you share these images, you are in breach of the law. And I hope one day the police will put a charge to someone who have shared those types of images. I think we have to send a message. That level of depravity must end in our society.
I have to agree. They might also come under the cyber crimes as well.
Yeah.
But it's something that we should be reporting.
We must have a level of discernment to say, no, this is not a video to circulate. What are you gaining? We're so interested in likes and so on.
Before we move on, I just want to address a quick concern in the chat on YouTube. Someone is asking, someone records an officer and decides to doctor this video for malicious use. How does that help the officer and his family even after a correction is done? And I just want to point out that the reason that citizens feel so compelled to record officers is because no one is there as an objective record. We have been calling for the body-worn cameras repeatedly. And if the officer is equipped with a body-worn camera, there will always be an objective record that would be very difficult to tamper with. So even in the face of other records from citizens, there would be that objective record to compare. So I think that's where we need to have our minds. Okay, so we will take the break, and when we come back, we'll go into the substantive topic, constitutional crossroads. We'll do our right of the day or trivia, and we'll be right back.
morning and welcome to the newest edition to the Nationwide News Network family on Hot 102.
Good afternoon, I'm Erica Allen.
I'm Elizabeth Bennett.
In Nationwide News at this hour.
This is Nationwide. I'm Cliff Hughes.
And I'm Carol Narcisse.
Morning, welcome to This Morning on Hot 102.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Beverly Anderson Manley. Good morning and welcome.
For 20 years, Nationwide 90 FM has been your trusted source for breaking news, delivering critical updates when you needed them most. 3:37 in the afternoon, we interrupt to bring you more from the One Don Klansman gang trial. Another guilty verdict. With fearless, fact-based journalism that unearthed the truth.
Between 2012 and 2018, nearly $5.5 million was taken from the track legend.
And insightful commentary that sparked meaningful conversations and shifted perspectives.
Welcome to the front page. I'm Emily Crooks. I am Naomi Francis. We're pleased to be joined by Roger Clark.
From the stories that shook Jamaica,
we're having an earthquake,
to those that inspired change and left lasting impacts.
In 2014, to be dealing with an issue such as the Mario Dean case.
Nationwide 90 FM has been there, diving deep into the issues that matter most to you. As we mark 20 years of dedicated service in 2025, we honor the trust you have placed in us and reaffirm our commitment to serving you, the Jamaican people. Rooted in truth, fairness, and integrity, we continue to provide incisive reporting with a foundation of accountability and respect. While we celebrate our journey, we are also focused on the future, fueled by the same passion and purpose that has always driven us. Thank you for supporting Team Revolution for 2 decades. Stay with us. The best is yet to come.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. Today we'll be discussing constitutional crossroads, exploring the 3 options for a final appellate court. But before we get into the clips, the script, we're going to talk about our right of the day, which is really a Did You Know? And it's about the CCJ as well. So it speaks to the 2 jurisdictions of the Caribbean Court of Justice. It has an appellate jurisdiction and an original jurisdiction. The appellate jurisdiction is really what we're talking about today. But that section of the court serves as a final court of appeal for criminal and civil matters for Caribbean communities who have agreed to that. And the original jurisdiction is a first instance court, and that has to do with enforcing the provisions in the Treaty of Chagaramas, which is what would govern our Caribbean community. It's our Caribbean Community Agreement. So they serve both as that court in the original jurisdiction that looks over that treaty, and they also serve as the appellate court for Barbados, Belize, Dominica, and Guyana. So our trivia question for today is, when was the CCJ officially inaugurated? So when was the Caribbean Court of Justice officially inaugurated? So you can send your response in the chat on YouTube, on WhatsApp at 2397583, or on Instagram at JA4Justice.
You had a momentary lapse just now.
Yes.
I see Marigold saying in the chat that we want justice, right?
Yes.
And that's the exact issue here of discussion, access to justice and the implications of that. Now, the reason for saying that we're currently at a crossroads, and I listened to Dion Jackson Miller. She has an excellent YouTube program, not on the other radio station, which I shall not call, on Nationwide, but on her private YouTube platform. She was asking the question, can we move on given the stalemate that we see happening between the parliamentary opposition and the government? Because that is one of the discussions now that is the reason for the opposition saying that, listen, we're not going back to the Joint Select Committee reviewing the Republic Bill until and unless we get some answers around the Caribbean Court of Justice. And remember, you have three options. One of them is not really an option for me, but that's my own view. And I think I represent the JFJ here, which is the Privy Council remaining there. But if we're saying we're having full severing of ties with our former colonizer, then there are two options that we can look at. We can look at moving towards the Caribbean Court of Justice or having a final local court here in Jamaica. So how do we move ahead? And what are some of the things that we should be looking towards? We're going to be having that conversation. So we're going to be discussing as we go through the clips that we're going to be playing, and we're going to be explaining issues for our listeners around jurisprudence. What exactly does that mean? What are the financial implications for people? And I always ask the question, do you have Vibes Cartel money? Because we're not talented people. I just have the little head that read a few papers and write a few things. I can sing and dance and have that excitement that you saw at Freedom Street. So do we have the Vibes Cartel money to hire the Bert Samuels, the John Clark, and the Isot Buchanan, Bianca, and so on? So food for thought in terms of whether access to justice may be denied for some Jamaican citizens when we look at the number of cases that may actually advance to the Privy Council. What are some of the safeguards that have been instituted for the Caribbean Court of Justice? Because you hear people saying that, listen, the one of them go university together, and therefore everybody know everybody, and therefore, bias and so on may come into play. So that type of discussion we're going to be having, and Jade had shared the numbers with you to call 630-937-124 or 618-8255, and you can send us the WhatsApp message. So, Jade, you want to lead out now?
Sure. So I think we can, we have been looking at whether or not to adopt the CCJ as our final appellate court. And it's been a broad part of the constitutional reform process, as Mikel would have said, aimed at transitioning us to a republic. Now, as we continue to break these ties, we consider the questions that Mikel just asked you, right? The British Privy Council is our final court of appeal. Do we keep that? Which I'm also of the opinion that that is not an option. But we have heard from several persons, including leader of the opposition, Mark Golding, who raised points during the January 15th meeting of the Joint Select Committee reviewing the Constitutional Amendment Republic Bill. And he stated that the missed opportunities in the process, that there were missed opportunities in the process, and questioning why the government would not have reintroduced the CCJ bill. So we'll take that clip now.
The bills to move to the Caribbean Court of Justice, the CCJ, as Jamaica's final court of appeal, were tabled in this parliament for the second time 10 years ago. Are the people of Jamaica not entitled to be told why the government has not tabled the CCJ bills again, thereby signaling that both sides, government and opposition, will work together to accomplish the twin objectives of transitioning both from the British monarchy and from the British monarch's court? Is the government not under a fundamental duty to explain in clear and unambiguous terms why it is determined to proceed in this piecemeal fashion, instead of using the historic opportunity of this constitutional reform process to ensure that the majority of the Jamaican people enjoy the benefit of access to justice to their highest court? After all, the CCJ, as a globally respected regional institution, has long been provided to serve this purpose and is doing so with excellence that is internationally acclaimed. Let me repeat and stress, we need answers to these questions because the way in which the process is moving will condemn the majority of our citizens to remaining way out of sight back there without their fundamental right of access to justice being assured, and with no guarantee of their interests ever reaching the front page. The current approach leaves the people's interests behind. It is our sacred duty to bring them forward. Madam Chair, in the name of all that is good, all that is caring, considerate, and true, this situation must, in all conscience, be remedied before there can be opposition or support. The opposition has sought the answers to these questions before, and now we seek them again of the government at this game-changing juncture in the country's history. As it stands, the government is leading Jamaica into a situation in which the British monarchy would have been ditched, the head of state would no longer be in Buckingham Palace, but Jamaicans would have to obtain a visa and would have to pay many, many millions of dollars to enjoy the privilege of gaining entry into their highest court, the court of the very same abandoned British monarch.
All right, so that is the leader of opposition, Mark Golding. He was speaking on January 15. I think that was the only meeting that the opposition went to for the Joint Select Committee. So he had posed some questions at that committee to Minister Malahoo Fort about the government's position on the Caribbean Court of Justice. Let us segue to a comment made, however, by our Prime Minister when he appeared last May, on May 20, 2024. He was doing an interview on CVM Sunrise, and he made known the government's position. And I say made known reservedly so, because I think we've seen almost like a little bit of dancing through the raindrops from the government about what definitively is their position on the final court here being in Jamaica. You've heard it waving around, but you've also heard statements about a referendum. But let's hear from the Prime Minister when he spoke on May 20 last year.
I'm glad you have raised that, because we have said it on many occasions. Mm-hmm. Our position is that a final court should be a Jamaican final court. However, whatever ends up being the final court should go through this process of an indicative referendum. The people should have a say on it. That's number one for us. People should have a say. And secondly, if we are having a final court to be repatriated, it shouldn't go to Port of Spain, it should come to Kingston. That has been our position. Now, on the matter of the final court, because we are saying to the people of Jamaica, we also want to hear your view on it. It may very well turn out that the view of the public is that it should be the CCJ.
Right.
So what we don't want to do is to go to the situation in prescribing to the people of Jamaica.
So you have a position, but it's not a hardline position.
No, our position is, first and foremost, let the people decide it. Right? What we would like to see is this, but really, the people should decide it. What the PNP is saying is, don't ask the people anything. Just go to the CCJ. Now, let's be fair. There are many people in Jamaica who have not expressed their view on the CCJ.
Correct.
And are very silent about it, because there is a view that is carried by persons who are authoritative in the society. But quietly, there are those who might be saying, you know what, let's think about it. The other problem with it is that we need a process. In the same way that the issue of the Republic, we've put it through this very intensive process of public debate, so too should that go to that intensive process of public debate. These are fundamental things. It's, as the leader of the opposition has said, and therefore it can't be that because one political party has a particular view on it, then that is what we must do. It is unreasonable. Absolutely unreasonable.
All right, so that is our Prime Minister. He was speaking last year, Dr. Andrew Holness, and you hear talks being made of a referendum. when we return from the break, one of the things I want us to touch on, Jade, is just a little bit of a historic overview. And we're going to be hearing a very short clip as well from former Prime Minister Bruce Golding. But let's take the break and I give the overview on the CCJ bills that were tabled in the early 2000s by the then PNP administration.
At the Jamaica Customs Agency, we care for our employees, customers, stakeholders, citizens, and our country. Customs cares. The temperature by the Jamaica Customs Agency is
32 degrees Celsius here in Kingston and 29 out west in Montego Bay.
Yeah, fry eye. I wish you by Chinaman playing in Japan last night.
Please do not address me as Fry Eye. My name is Mark.
Oh, wait. I talk so spakey spokey.
And besides, I have no clue what any Chinese man played. But I do know what the latest Blue Dot polls, powered by Total Tools, are showing.
So me ask this man about dropping on this brother talk about poll.
Be quiet, peasant. Listen to the revolution in media starting with the 6 a.m. news on Monday, February 17 to hear the key findings, including which party is favored by most potential voters for the next general election.
But look, pan the man who me and him near me same bread and mackerel gravy for lunch pan the site where they. I will take you.
I'm struggling to understand that strange dialect you speak, but hear this. The pollsters went into 2 traditional swing seats and those results will be included in the big reveal. That's the nationwide Blue Dot polls, powered by Total Tools, starting February 17 on Nationwide 90 FM, the source for the only numbers you'll ever need.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. So before the break, we just heard a statement from Prime Minister Andrew Holness while he was speaking on CVM Sunrise last year on the government's position on the CCJ. We have also heard from Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, Marlene Malahu Fort, this past January during a post-cabinet press briefing, emphasizing that while Jamaica participates in the original jurisdiction for the CCJ, there's more work that is needed before we can decide if it should be our final appellate court. So we'll take that clip.
Consensus on which final court for Jamaica, but there are 3 options for consideration. The argument around accession to the appellate jurisdiction of the CCJ is understood. Jamaica is already a part of the court. It subscribes to the original jurisdiction of the court, which deals with Caribbean community matters under the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. So it is not true to say that Jamaica is paying for a court that it is not using. Jamaica is a member of the original jurisdiction of the court as the community court dealing with Caribbean community matters. And Minister Hill is very aware that very often matters in the portfolio assigned to him, particularly trade-related matters, are dealt with there, even if you are not aware of those matters. So it really should not have taken the opposition by surprise that more work needs to be done on which final court will be Jamaica's final court in a reformed constitution.
That was Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, Honorable Marlene Malahu Fort.
You know, here is my issue with both political parties. And I will explain a little bit the challenge I'm having with the opposition's position as well. Because if they were to form government, one would think they can move to the CCJ without the other political party. So this hardline stance I do find quite problematic. But on the other hand, I'm listening to the government, and while there seems to be a love for the option of a final court here in Jamaica, the position almost seems shaky. Because I ask, if you're of the view that a referendum should be called for the people to decide, you're telling me you want to have 2 referenda?
Yes.
It's a very shaky position as well from the ruling political party. Because if that is the firm position of the government, I ask 2 questions. What are you doing to educating the Jamaican people on the different options? And I ask the same question to the parliamentary opposition. What are you doing? Are we taking a hard political party stance where you're expecting people just to vote because they may vote green or orange? Are you asking people to vote from an informed perspective? Where is the GIS, the PBC in educating people? Where are the town hall meetings on these issues? And I think we need to look a little bit more around the financial and economic feasibility of the final court. But
I just wanted to make a point before you even go there, Mikhail, just to say that I do think that practically we really have to be thinking about the practicality of things. I saw a comment in the chat earlier about the phased approach as well. And to say that we are simultaneously thinking of something that we have come to a decision needs a referendum to be finally decided.
But it doesn't need it.
But we've come to that decision, and then we are also going to already be doing a referendum to decide on a number of issues. Why would we wait to do it twice? Because even just the cost of the referendum is a consideration as well.
Unless you're going to be twinning it with an election that is coming up, and we don't have that type of direct democracy in Jamaica where our people were used to voting for our leaders while you vote on an issue.
Yeah.
But let's have some more discussions around it. And this is why I'm saying that the ruling political party, their position is shaky, to say the least. Let us hear from an interview that we did with Bruce Golding, former Prime Minister, and he was speaking with us on Let's Start Justice. We were on another radio station at the time. This interview we conducted on May 22, and that was actually 2 days shy of Prime Minister Andrew Holness's CVM interview. But when we were talking to Bruce Golding, he was sharing his perspective on where we go from here around the CCJ stalemate. I think that was the terminology we had used at the time. So let's hear from Prime Minister Bruce Golding.
I have hitched on to the line of Edward Seaga back in 2005, I believe it was, or 2006. Edward Seaga, he said, look, this is a brand new court. We don't know how it's going to work. Let's watch it for 10 years, and at the end of 10 years, let us review its operation, let us look at its decision, and let us come to a decision as whether we are compatible with the quality of the justice that it is dispensing. The court is now 19 years old. Mr. Seaga said 10 years. We have not done that review, as far as I'm aware. Now, let's look at the decision. Let us do a serious review. Let us get some of our best lawyers to jump in and say, no, look, we feel that they made a mistake here, but at the same time, they created some impressive new jurisprudential breakthroughs here. And then let that inform us as to whether or not we'll be comfortable with it.
Yeah, that was former Prime Minister Bruce Golding. He was speaking on Let's Start Justice in May 2024. You know, Bruce Golding raised a significant question or issue, the review of the CCJ. And this, again, is the challenge I'm having with the ruling political party on this, as well as the PNP. Let me say that. Because I don't think beyond saying decolonization, and we're there, I don't think we can be talking about severing ties from a former colonizer, but you still have your final court there. And for different reasons. And I want us just remind for us to go through that merit rule that was changed last year, Jade.
Sure.
But I don't think the People's National Party as a political party movement have really said to us why, beyond decolonization and the importance of severing the ties there, what exactly is the merit of the CCJ? How have they done with judgments, the type of decisions coming out? And then on the other side, I'm saying to the Jamaica Labour Party, what is the issue that you have with the CCJ? Because if you say that we all agree that we need to move away from the Privy Council, what exactly is the concern with the Caribbean Court of Justice? And I think let us play the next and the final clip that we have from the President of the Caribbean Court of Justice, Justice Adrian Saunders, who also spoke with us on JFJ's Let's Start Justice last year, where he outlined the role of the CCJ, but also the types of decisions coming out of the court. Let's listen to that clip.
The role of the Court of Appeal is to decide whether the judge has made a mistake. And normally that is it.
Yes.
But sometimes you have instances where the law is uncertain, where two or more reasonable minds can come to different views on what the law is, or situations where the law is out of keeping, out of step with what the society requires. And in cases like that, you go to an apex court.
Yes.
So apex courts have fewer cases, but they have the hard cases. They have those cases where the law needs to be clarified. When you have a situation where ordinary people, by reason of high filing fees, by reason of all sorts of barriers, are unable to access an apex court, then your jurisprudence can get undermined, stultified, because the hard cases, it's not only rich people have hard cases.
Yes.
All of the hard cases we have done, 99% of them have been brought by ordinary poor people. We have done, for example, cases where a single mother who wanted a protection order made against the father of her child was not able to get that from the courts below.
Yes.
She appealed to the CCJ, and we were able to clarify the law in relation to single mothers, because there was some uncertainty in the law as to whether the only persons who could apply for protection orders were spouses and former spouses. The point I'm making is that any country all the countries of the Caribbean, they require an apex court that can address all the hard cases, the cases which help to carry forward and develop, promote their jurisprudence. We have done cases where, and this is another very important role of an apex court, the dialogue that court carries on with the other branches of the government. Constitutionally, the state governance in the country is dispersed among three branches: the parliament, the executive, we could call it government,
Yes.
and the judiciary. These are three co-equal branches. In a healthy democracy, there is a certain interplay between and among these branches. Not that they sit down at a cocktail party and discuss things. No. In the carrying out of their roles, they influence each other and they accept intimations or sometimes directions from each other. So there must be this dialogue that takes place. And this is something that occurs in apex courts in the United States, in Canada, throughout the Commonwealth world. And it's not just about carrying up a case by those who can afford to, and getting a result.
That was President of the CCJ, the Honorable Justice Adrian Saunders. We are up on the break, but when we come back, I do want to give just my perspective a little bit on CCJ jurisprudence, because I've looked at a few of their judgments, and I think that they can have good implications for understanding human rights. So we'll take the break.
The national budget is everybody's business because it impacts every Jamaican. The time brought to you by the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service is
15 minutes going up to 2 o'clock.
Good morning and welcome to the newest addition to the Nationwide News Network family on Hot 102.
Good afternoon, I'm Erica Allen.
I'm Elizabeth Bennett.
In Nationwide News at this hour.
This is Nationwide. I'm Cliff Hughes.
And I'm Carol Narcisse.
Morning, welcome to This Morning on Hot 102.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Beverly Anderson Manley. Good morning and welcome.
For 20 years, Nationwide 90 FM has been your trusted source for breaking news, delivering critical updates when you needed them most. 3:37 in the afternoon, we interrupt to bring you more from the One Don Klansman gang trial. Another guilty verdict. With fearless, fact-based journalism that unearthed the truth.
Between 2012 and 2018, nearly $5.5 million was taken from the track legend.
And insightful commentary that sparked meaningful conversations and shifted perspectives.
Welcome to the front page. I'm Emily Crooks. I am Naomi Francis. We're pleased to be joined by Roger Clark.
From the stories that shook Jamaica,
we're having an earthquake,
to those that inspired change and left lasting impacts.
In 2014, to be dealing with an issue such as the Mariodine case.
Nationwide 90 FM has been there, diving deep into the issues that matter most to you. As we mark 20 years of dedicated service in 2025, we honor the trust you have placed in us and reaffirm our commitment to serving you, the Jamaican people. Rooted in truth, fairness, and integrity, we continue to provide incisive reporting with a foundation of accountability and respect. While we celebrate our journey, we are also focused on the future, fueled by the same passion and purpose that has always driven us. Thank you for supporting Team Revolution for 2 decades. Stay with us. The best is yet to come.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We've been discussing our final appellate court and what those options are, what those could be. Before the break, we heard from Justice Adrian Saunders, who is the president of the CCJ, about some of the jurisprudence that has come out of the court. And I think I just want to highlight something that I know is a distinct difference between the Privy Council and the CCJ. As an attorney, this Privy Council tends to only consider questions, and I guess this is also because they are not very invested in the outcomes of the other questions. But the Privy Council tends to only consider questions to wrap up a case, right? So we can even look at, for
the
example,
19-page judgment from Vibes Cartel case.
Yes, I was about to go straight there. For example, in the Vibes Cartel case, while they would have looked distinctly at one of the issues that were up for appeal, there were 2 other major issues that were up for appeal that would have been good jurisprudence for us to know what the final court would have said about the way how it was handled.
And,
Right, the issue of the major things that have to do with the procedure of criminal matters. And the court just decided not to do that. They said, well, we've already answered the question enough for there to be an appeal, So that's enough.
And people are looking on, and I agree with you, Jade. While Vibes Cartel is now free in LA and so on with his fiancée, and that's good for him.
Yes.
For our jurisprudence for any future matters, it is important because remember, when a decision is taken by your final court, it paves the way for future judgments, given how our legal framework is set up, and that's why it's important. So even when we hear Justice Saunders, for example, speaking to that domestic violence case and the basis upon which that protection order was initially denied, what former spouse means, and then you even look within the context of our Domestic Violence Act here in Jamaica, it's quite pivotal.
Yes.
But I take it a step further. If you look at another critical example just recently, we have a new charter that came into being in 2011, our Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedom. And when that particular matter was challenged in court, the Kensington case,
yes,
and you read through that judgment, right throughout, you hear the reference being made to the McEwen case that involved the cross-dressers in Guyana.
Yes.
Why is that important? Because it was deciding on what it meant to have freedom of expression, because these matters have to be litigated for us to understand the extent of our constitutional rights. So when you have a strong jurisprudence, it means that we can have more matters being heard that will guide the courts on how to actually give proper reading on the extent of the rights to which we're guaranteed within our constitution.
It also guides our legislators when we are writing our legislation to ensure that it is in line with the provisions of the constitution and not infringing on any other rights that are there.
And another point, and you said it earlier, the Privy Council is more renowned for criminal matters.
Yes.
Those are the matters that tend to go up to the Privy Council. But that's not to say that the Caribbean Court of Justice have not seen or heard those matters. In fact, if we look at the popular case that Barbados sought to overturn the Privy Council decision, because remember Barbados went to CCJ in 2005. So that Privy Council decision that was taken to say that, listen, you can't automatically impose death penalty anymore. Barbados went to CCJ to have that particular decision reviewed, and CCJ agreed with the Privy Council. So the point that I'm making is, for those of you who tend to say that, listen, let us continue with the Privy Council because they tend to rule in a particular way and the CCJ won't rule in a similar fashion and so on, the evidence does not hold true to that type of sentiment. Let us be guided by evidence, be guided by data.
I also want to add something on the point of proximity, because I see that come up a lot, that we're too close to the persons who may be on the CCJ. I would argue that proximity is a benefit and not a detriment. And I would argue that in the sense that we are all from the Caribbean and have a certain understanding of a Caribbean context. There have been Privy Council decisions where the Privy Council has declined to rule on a point because they do not have the cultural context to make that ruling.
The diversity.
Yes.
It's just the other day they managed to get somebody who does not represent the typical white male.
Exactly.
So these things we must look at. But Jade, there are many things for us to consider. If the argument is that too many people know each other for us to move to the CCJ, what would you say if we have a final court here in Jamaica?
None of our matters could be litigated.
A lot of times we open the newspaper, we listen to the news here on Nationwide, and you hear the articles and so on about people trying to get their rights to appeal realized, but guess what happened? The state can't put forward any of the administrative reports and so on necessary to have the cases advance. You remember that matter involving, I think our John Clark here, our board chair, represented the client. He was the individual who allegedly took some funds from, you remember the case?
Yes.
Sorry, the memory.
I can't remember the name of the case, but
old
I
age
know
reaching
exactly
me right
what
now.
you're talking about.
But his right to appeal was undermined simply because the state did not move fast enough to have his appeal dealt with.
Yes.
So the question is, when we look at all of the systemic issues, not to say our judges aren't the best and the brightest here, but infrastructure is not strong enough to get to the stage of having a final court here in Jamaica. So these are the things we have to look at. And I think we have to be guided again by data. If we look, and I heard the Minister Marlene Malahou challenging the leader of the opposition on this, that people, they're not being denied justice. And I disagree. Because if it is that you cannot find the funds to move ahead with a case if you want to have that matter appealed, then justice is being denied on the basis of one's financial capacity.
Yes.
Because if you look at the matters, I think on average each year, the Court of Appeal would hear somewhat 250 cases, but only 3 or 4 actually advance to Privy Council. Not because people don't want to have their matter litigated or heard before the highest appellate court. It's a matter of finances. Look how much money you hear that the state would have had to pay for legal costs for the Vibes Cartel matter. I think it was $150 million if memory serves me correct.
Yes.
Because you have to find your army of lawyers, and then your army of lawyers have to hire a barrister in England to hear the matter because they're more familiar with the court there. So,
well, I mean, it's not only that they're more familiar, they also have the jurisdiction.
Yeah. So these are the things. Another thing, Jade, I want to quickly, because time is catching up. And this is the challenge why I'm having with both political parties. Let us go back to the 2004 CCJ bills that were tabled by the then Parliament, the government, People's National Party. They were trying to move to the CCJ by simple majority. So in other words, a single political party would seek to advance to the CCJ. The matter was challenged. Even JFJ at the time said, no. You can't want to have a final appellate court, the Privy Council removed, move towards the CCJ without the people having a say on the matter. JFJ did not support it. The matter was heard at the Privy Council, and the Privy Council said, guess what? While you can remove the Privy Council, because the Privy Council is unentrenched, the courts below it, which would be your Court of Appeal and your Supreme Court, are entrenched. And therefore, to put your final appellate court, that must similarly be entrenched. Simply saying, for us to move towards the CCJ, you must have 2/3 majority. Mm-hmm. So when it gets to Senate, at least one opposition member must agree. Mm-hmm. It doesn't stop there. Because the CCJ, if we were to move towards it, it would have to be entrenched. To get it entrenched, it goes back to the amendment procedure in our Constitution.
Yes.
To include a new entrenched provision, you must have a referendum to change it.
Yes.
And this is the mischief, if you will, that the Joint Select Committee is trying to fix with the Republic Bill. And that is my disappointment with the parliamentary opposition not being there. Because either way, if they were to form government, you cannot move to the CCJ without the opposition, which would be the JLP if they were to win, signing off. To make the change, to have this thing now entrenched in our Constitution, you must go to the people of Jamaica.
Yes.
So where are they in the Republic Bill? That is the challenge I'm having. So I think to wrap up, for ease of understanding, there are many benefits to the CCJ. On a matter of principle, I think we have to move away from the Privy Council. The question is, are we ready for a final court here in Jamaica? And I think the answer is no. We do not have the infrastructure at this time to have a final appellate court here in Jamaica. So I think the recommendation is this. Why not adopt the CCJ and then move towards a final court in a few years' time when we have the infrastructure to get there? But if we're saying the people must decide, where are we with the public education? Do we have an indicative, non-binding referendum so that we can have a sense of what the people are feeling, what they're saying, so we know how we can make a public policy decision? That would be my charge to both political parties.
I have to support you, Mikkel. I would say more, but we have a minute left. So I'd just like to say we did have a winner for a trivia question. The answer for a trivia question was April 10th. It's April 16th.
I don't like your all y'all ask questions and look so and shaky, you know.
No, you know, I didn't memorize the date. You know, I'm bad at dates. Come on.
Don't look too shaky with that response. Listeners, I'm going to double check on your behalf.
But we did get a correct answer. We got Kayla on the YouTube chat, in the YouTube chat. So please send a message at 2397583 to get your prize. Thank you for participating.
Yeah, that's it. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much.
All right.
Jamaicans for justice, the people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Out of many we are one in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities, no to unlawful detention and police brutalization, class, gender, race or religion. We not tolerate discrimination.
To join the fight against injustice, contact us at 755-4524 or Jamaicans4Justice.org.
The people's champion.
Tune in to Cliff Hughes Online from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m.